Analyst got a lot of crap for calling the Na'Vi major run a fluke, and maybe rightfully so, it's hard to say, but I found it kind of funny that Eternal Fire has been completely written off for their recent run of form, even to the point where I think it was Spirit, but certain teams have like gotten crap for essentially, oh, you only had to beat Eternal Fire in the final of that event you won, like it's not even that big of a deal. Well, Eternal Fire, I mean, if you look at their recent record, they've been doing quite well. I mean, with relative consistency, they've been beating the majority of teams outside of the top 10. Inside of the top 10, it's been a little bit more of a toss-up, but I think that's totally fine. And this is the first, like, I guess, really super legit run they've had, right? So I think at this point, you have to give them respect. They beat Vitality, and they go, this is map 5 against Na'Vi. But on Pisseron, you got Wonderful into the 1v3 with site control, goes for the plant. I'm really not a huge fan of faking in this situation. I mean, look, the reality is that you don't want to try and, like, you don't want to limit a player too much, right? But at the same time, what? You're 1v3 with 15 health? Maybe he thinks that he just doesn't have time to plant or he's about to get jump shotted or something. But if he thinks he has time to plant there, maybe your 1v3 goes from like 3% chance to 5% if you fake and then peek out. But at the same time, you could just guarantee a bomb plant, and if you get a guaranteed bomb plant, that might even lead to more round wins, like over the long run. If you were to run this back like 500 times, right? You might win more rounds by the end of the half because of that extra $600 per player than you do from, you know, the 1 in 20 times you win the 1v3 additional to the, you know, to that. But in any case, round 2, basically nothing to work with here for Na'Vi. This seems to be about the standard play. You have the mid smoke. It's hard to contest if, you know, people don't really want to play on Cat because it's such a close range angle. And then on the CT side, Woxic's doing essentially what is very standard nowadays as well, which is play with an M4 towards car. You have a teammate in towards, man, those were crisp shots. Okay. You have a teammate in towards elevator or plat, depending. And you just try and duel with them so they can't 5-man focus one player. It can get a bit dicey. Like I've seen players, even in demos I've shown on this channel, where they kind of crouch behind car here. And that can be quite effective, especially with the player on plat. But I've also seen it go wrong, where they just kind of get 1D'd. And then the car angle, it's not like easily retrievable, but it is somewhat retrievable depending on the situation, especially if one of the CTs dies on plat. If one of the CTs dies on plat, then and they drop a smoke, then it is actually like fairly retrievable. So Bit throws the insta corner smoke, it looks like, from his spawn. And this is a round where I've seen this one on the broadcast. Xantares goes for the molly, waits, and he's just not quite in time. It's going to be the next round, actually, where they try and beat that. But first gun round, Woxic on Cat with the op. They're just going to triple up A. Wicadia and Calyx towards B. And it's going to end up turning into a B split here in a second. And it's just a tough situation. You've got a lurk smoke out from the T's, which means Calyx is going to try and play behind the lurk smoke, which is generally a good idea. You prevent the lurk through that you're actually really scared of. But at the same time, the mid to B split's happening. So either Wicadia is going to hold or he isn't. And if he doesn't, Calyx is basically trapped. And not only that, but by the time, you know, anything's going to happen, I mean, Ime is moving up. It's just obvious that Calyx is in that corner. There's very little other positions he could be. And from Calyx's POV, what Calyx wants to do there, obviously, is Calyx wants to wait for the first player to come out tunnels, start killing him, spam him, and then kind of like move in while shooting and try and finish off the second player. Because typically there's a max of 2 players in tunnels. Usually, honestly, I feel like there's 1, but, you know, sometimes 2. Rarely is there 3 for a mid-B, because then what happens if a single player dies on your mid-B hit or someone tries to lurk through the smoke, right? So if he could pick up the first kill, turn it into 2, and then pick up an AK that could go for a reasonable retake. But again, it was just so obvious where he was because Wicadia died so quickly. And that's not really on Wicadia either. That's just like a really nice shot from Ime. But here we've got, again, going for long control is Na'Vi. I want to see how they throw this smoke corner. So this time around, they throw a lineup. They throw a lineup smoke. And because of that lineup smoke, if we looked at the last round when they threw that instant smoke, this time around they throw one that has a lineup. And it actually took a second for them to throw it, looked like. But as a lineup, it means Xantares has a quarter of a second of a gap there before that smoke goes out. And Na'Vi are just insta-rushing straight out. Obviously, they have a good amount of flashes, but Xantares just finds the perfect timing. And maybe Xantares, I mean, even that play from Xantares can be a bit risky. If Na'Vi go for a peek with an AWP, then the AWP might get blind, they take a shot, and because he peeked out instantly right after the flash to catch that gap, the AWP might even get the kill on him. But that's a risk you just have to take, right? That's just like a standard risk that you take when you're doing more or less anything. So it puts them in a 5v3, which is pretty much a gimme at this point, especially the bomb. Wonder if I has to go back and get the bomb. There's so much time on the clock that, I mean, Na'Vi could be going anywhere, but at the same time, it basically means that it's hard for you to save in this situation. Of course, I think if it was 3-0 instead of 2-1, then Eternal Fire might be getting a little bit aggressive, thinking about going, pushing near the end of the round. But I mean, a 5v3 is far from unlosable, right? And so if you actually do get aggressive before like 20 seconds left, then you actually, I mean, you can turn it into a 3v4 and it can go quite badly. So maybe I was a little bit ambitious with the idea of like getting position to hunt. But the hit up cat, I mean, Na'Vi did have a decent amount of utility. Unfortunately, JL gets killed by Woxic. I mean, Woxic wasn't blind, so it's pretty much just like an unwinnable situation here now in the 2v5. And I mean, if they can pick up a kill or two, that's kind of optimal. Wonderful, though, is trapped, and they know exactly where he is. So as long as Woxic doesn't miss a shot, which he doesn't, it's a pretty easy conversion into round 5, where now you've got Na'Vi with not a ton of, actually, I saw JL, I was like, what's going on there? They've got a decent buy. It's not the best buy of all time. Alexi B is going to throw the mid-door smoke with the standard lineup, but man, have I had a ridiculous amount of people tell me that lineup is really inconsistent for them when they throw it, and me too. And it's funny because people that can throw that consistently, they're like, what do you mean? You just line up with the line on the thing and you throw it and it's easy. And then people that can't throw it consistently are like, what the fuck do you mean line up with the line? You can, if I'm looking slightly to the left or the right without realizing it, then I just line up. It's just fucked. It's just fucked. It's whatever. I was looking at this actually a little earlier. Is Dust 2 now CT-sided since they added the box, right? Since they added the box on Elevator. Obviously, that was to push it a little bit more CT-sided. It definitely feels more comfortable. It feels like a more reasonable map at this point. It actually did push it CT-sided, it seems like. So if you look at the last month, top 20, it's 53.5% CT-sided. In the last 3 months, and I think the box update was like 2 months ago or something, it's 50.7. And for context sake, 53.5 is pretty CT-sided. Overpass was something like 56 or 57. The most CT-sided maps, like Train, like OG Train, was probably like 58. So 53.5 is like, it's relatively CT-sided. But the move out mid from Na'Vi, leading with the op in Wonderful's hands. It looks like, I mean, they do have the utility to go for this, but sometimes you lead the op out, you can catch people that are jump spotting, especially if you know Woxic almost never starts the op anywhere but A, right? That might be a tendency that Eternal Fire have. So the opper here with some support has reasonable ability to get out and look for picks. And not only that, by getting Wonderful into this position, it allows this exact play where you're out mid, really far up, and then you smoke and you're already up B, and the timing is very, it's really easy to catch the CTs off guard in B. They're kind of like trying not to peek into the opper, so they're kind of giving you some space to work with, and then before they even realize that you're pushing indoors or you're pushing in the window and there's nothing you can do. It's actually a really effective timing. But obviously in this case, they walk into a 3B setup. And I mean, that's like a percentage play. Once in a while, if you're Eternal Fire, you're going to want to go for a triple B play. And I mean, just the way the half has progressed, it looked like a good time to go for it, right? The long play from Na'Vi hadn't worked twice in a row. What they might try and react by going over to the A side. By the way, with this smoke play, you don't need to do it crazy with the op. If you wanted to like do this yourself, you can just come out mid to throw the smoke instead of throwing it from back here, and that actually makes a pretty big difference in the timing. There's something about like that smoke bouncing a bunch of times. Even players on Cato, like they're smoking mid to B because they can hear it bounce and they know exactly what's happening. Whereas if you throw it from outside, it's obviously, especially in CS:GO, it's not as effective of a smoke. So it's not quite the same. I think unless you have like a good lineup, or do you need? Yeah, I'm not sure if you could. Maybe you could have a lineup from outside mid to throw it like on that ledge of the box or whatever. But it's 4-1. All right, that's what we know. That's what we know for sure. And 3 AKs in the hands of Eternal Fire, so they're feeling probably pretty good about the situation. They're probably feeling pretty good. Now, the only problem is they don't actually have another resmoke for tunnels, so there is going to need to be a duel at some point here, and nice little play from Na'Vi. I wonder if they got this, like, they got this read from previous rounds that and I wouldn't be surprised if they did, that Eternal Fire are tossing out their utility quite early. They're using 2 smokes quite early, or they're using one of their smokes mid for whatever reason. I'm not sure that's the case, but they're using their 2 smokes early, which means they're only left with a Molotov. So they regroup at about 50 seconds. They want to try and get ahead of this molly. They see the molly thrown, and then it really heads up play, I think, by JL. He sees Bit gets through it, and instead of abandoning Bit, and that's how the whole round collapses, he's just willing, like, okay, I'm just going to take a bit of damage, and it's not going to be perfect, but if my entry goes through, I have to go with him. And I don't think that's universally true, right? Your entry can go through, especially in pugs. You have to know when to, like, cut ties, like, you really do. When your entry does something really stupid and you're like, no, whoa, no shot I'm doing that. But at the pro level, I think you just have to trust your entry into situations like this. You just have to go with him when he goes for that. And if he didn't, then Bit probably dies, because JL is the one that got the kill there. And then it's very obvious what's going on, and there's no longer like a surprise factor in the play from Na'Vi. So really heads up play, in my opinion, from JL. Gives Na'Vi their second round. And honestly, I mean, the situation is that they were in kind of pretty dire straits, really, if it was a 5-1 scoreline. Like, this would be looking pretty bad. And not only do they win the round, but when you win an eco like that and you pick up 3 guns, look how much money they have just off of winning 1 round, right? You have 3 players that can comfortably rebuy into the following round. It's kind of ridiculous how much money you make when it's like, oh, you could have bought anyways off of 1,900. Instead, you win 3,300 and you have the AK saved over. From Na'Vi's side, standard mid smoke. I mean, they're pretty much every team. It just shuts down any counterplay in middle. It's just such an annoying smoke. But I guess CTs, I mean, with the new box, even with the new smoke, CTs are still feeling just fine with the situation, especially with the dunk nades you can throw when you drop them in CT spawn. Xantrez goes back, picks up a second nade, and Wonderful just looks at it. Wonderful's just like, I'm getting hit by that. I hope it doesn't fucking kill me. Luckily for him, it turns out it doesn't kill him. Set up on B for Calyx and Wakadia. The lurk smoke, so mollying behind the lurk smoke is definitely pretty much standard. It just buys a little bit of time for you to get from like this back sight position to actually get to a position where you can actually hold this angle, like over here is pretty effective. I don't know, man. Mollying behind smokes in CS2, I don't know if this is just a feel thing where I'm like throwing these wrong, and I'm sure mostly I am, but it really feels like I can throw the same molly in the same spot 5 rounds in a row against the same smoke, and sometimes it feels like it blooms, and sometimes it feels like it doesn't. I don't know. It just feels like, in CS2, it just feels a little weirdly inconsistent, but it might just be me. Tell me if it's not. Tell me if it's not. Tell me if I'm not crazy. I actually want to see what happened with Alexi B here, because they're moving up cat. Kill goes one way. Alexi B drops down. This is a kind of a classic strat that has been run for a really, really long time. In fact, at the height of the popularity of this strat, you would actually have a player here tossing flashes that would land here, which are insanely effective and would be now You don't even need necessarily a lineup. Someone could, if they had flashes, and that might be what Alexi B is waiting for. He might literally be waiting for here, being like, hey, can you flash for me? It wouldn't surprise me. They can't flash for him, so he just goes for the peek, finds a really nice timing, and hits a couple of really nice shots as well. Like, you have to admit that one. Leaving Calyx into a 1v2. He does know where both players are, and this is something I've noticed. I mean, this is just a small thing, but I notice this in pugs all the time where they're going to be like, play the time. He's got to run in the open. It's like in situations when your opponent has to be, you know, the time pressure's on him there. You know where he is. Like, just all playing time does is give you the 2v1, right? So there's very good reason to be double peeking when you know where your opponent is instead of waiting for the time, unless the time is like so ticked down that, you know, it'll put him in a situation where he can't win if you do wait for the time, right? And I don't even think they had the bomb planted there. Whatever. Eco from Eternal Fire. Not going to be looking like too much, I assume, although Calyx does have the MP9. I wonder if he's... I wonder if he like shoots it to try and make it look like they're going for a buy to like maybe bait out some extra utility from Na'Vi. Because sometimes you think your opponents are going for an eco, so you play a little bit more a little more passive and try and take long range duels. Then you're like, oh, they have rifles. Okay, so we're not too worried about that, and then you just can get destroyed by the pistols. But slow cross, this kind of seems to be pretty meta at this point, where you like smoke it and then you just have people walk across sometimes, and sometimes you smoke it and leave, so your opponents don't know when to nade the cross, because you can have multiple nades obviously in CT spawn, as we saw previously. When your opponents, it's kind of doubly effective when you drop those nades in spawn, because when your opponents go cat, you can nade them on cat for tons of damage, and when your opponents go long, you can multiple times nade out the smoke and catch people in the middle of the open to take them down, right? So if you make it too obvious when you're crossing, depending on the economy situation, right, the more money they have, right, the bigger of a deal it's going to be. The more likely they are to have more nades instead of less. All right, so Na'Vi going for a pretty similar play to what they did with the pistols, but this time they're doing it straight out. They're doing it right away. Interesting. I wonder if maybe they don't have a read on the way the utility is being thrown, although it wouldn't surprise me. Like, this is the type of situation where if you know there's a gap, this is something Na'Vi did on Nuke. If you know there's a gap before the smoke gets thrown down, sometimes they wait and then try and save it for a little bit longer. You can try and get in front of it and catch them off guard. Ime up first. He has a chance to get this kill on Calyx. It's definitely not an easy kill whatsoever. If he does get the kill, they're in a reasonable spot to maybe convert, especially because, and this may be the tendency they're looking at, Eternal Fire seem to be having a tendency to be very committed on long early on in the round, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that does mean that this B setup is very isolated. Which means, for example, if Calyx was to die instantly, there's no real fear of a third player coming through CT and throwing flashes up here, which is really how you oftentimes hold B hits, is these flashes from a mid player or a mid rotator that come up behind, and it's going to blind everyone. Basically, those flashes blind everyone, and this guy will never get blind from them. He can play around the double stack. You see Naf do this all the time. Play around the double stack, flash pops, peek out, you just catch two people full white, get the free kill, right? If that rotator has no chance of being there, then if Ime just gets this quick kill onto Calyx, then they can kind of, they can't take their time, but they can somewhat take their time trying to take down Wakadi at the back of the site. They don't need to like YOLO rush him to quite the same degree. I don't know if that's actually the case. I think primarily they just don't have to worry that he's going to get a support flash that's going to destroy them. They still have to kind of push him down pretty aggressively to take him down, right? They still have to commit. But either way, solid hold from Eternal Fire. One kill shuts the whole thing down. That's what I was talking about with that eco, where it's like, the first guy moves out, and then by the time the smoke's down afterwards, though, the rotate's already close enough. They already know what's going on. It's just not even worth going for it, right? So one death, whole place shut down. Then you got a 5v3, and I mean, it feels like it feels like Eternal Fire is just getting some pretty clean rounds when they're picking these up. I mean, it was kind of like, I don't want to say unlucky. I think that's not giving enough credit to the idea from the Na'Vi play, but it's certainly not like the most like strategic victory you would think the way Na'Vi won that initial gun round, or the initial round with pistols, right? When I'm thinking of like a strategic victory, obviously pop plays like that are part of a strategy, and they lead to, you know, you make your opponents worry about those types of plays. They're going to play a little bit different. You can actually exploit that. But at the same time, when I'm thinking of a strategic victory, I'm thinking isolating the rotator. And if someone says isolating the rotator, by the way, I asked what if people understood, like if someone says we're on a double eco here, that it means you're going to force and then you're going to save. And people were like, no, I had no idea. Like I don't even, I think some people disagreed that even necessarily means that, but in my experience, it does. So I'll explain the idea just quickly, that if someone says isolating the rotator, what it means is you're not trying to necessarily kill the rotator. The point is you isolate this player. This is this is the primary CT rotator that you're trying to isolate usually on T side, because he can be mid or he can be elevator, or like, well, honestly, he can be site, ramp, goose, maybe even game helper, but that's not really his spot. Or he can be towards, basically, he can be towards mid or he can be towards A, right? And isolating the rotator means draw Xantarez over to mid and then go up cat. Or draw Xantarez over to A and then go up mid to B. That's what isolate. So when you're thinking of a traditional like strategic outplay, you're isolating that rotator. And if you look at any map, usually that's what you think of. Like you draw the nuke. On Nuke, you draw the Heaven rotator to the wrong spot. On Inferno, you draw, well, it's kind of twofold. You can draw the Arch player to the wrong spot, or you can draw like the CT rotator from B to the wrong spot. Mostly every map has that type of thing. Anubis, you have the same thing with like a player that might rotate from B to mid. And when I think of a strategic victory, that's really what I think of. But at the same time, that might be taking a little bit away from the idea that like a B pop, if done not by accident, right? If there's a strategic basis for it, and if it's done within a system, is a strategic victory as well. It just doesn't feel quite the same way. And so it feels like Eternal Fire is surprisingly somehow feels like they're getting the better of Na'Vi to a certain extent. And here, this is something that nobody ever does in Pugs, I feel like, but it is worth doing. Look, you don't really want to retake B on Dust 2 if you can help it. However, occasionally there is reason to, and I think that flash would have been really, really powerful if he had thrown it tunnels. I don't know what happened. Maybe he was trying to throw it over and he hit his keyboard, so he threw it here, or maybe he just didn't mean, he thought he released it and then moved his mouse right before. But occasionally, and I mean occasionally, pivoting out to cover mid, focus mid and take that down, and then you end up at a 5v3, this is not a completely unreasonable play, because while you don't want to be retaking B, the key is that you don't want to be retaking B early, which early as in your opponents are going to have a lot of utility because it's early and they haven't wasted it elsewhere, and you don't want to retake B with like a 5v5 because there's so many spots they can be in. It's extremely tough to deal with. There is risks to it because you can end up in a situation like this where it's still a 3v3, it's still very winnable for Na'Vi, and in fact it looks like they probably are going to win this one. But I think there's especially here's the thing. This is why, if we remember back to round 4 or something like that, I mentioned that there's generally not, I don't know if almost never, but there's generally not 3 players in tunnels. That's a reason for Na'Vi to play 3 players in tunnels, right? Because if you play 3 players in tunnels, if they overfocus one side, in theory, you wouldn't want to lose both players, but you could cancel with those players. And one of them dies, and you have B site 4v5 if they were to focus the other direction. But that's not really, I don't think, necessarily a standard play unless it's something like Eternal Fire do all the time. It's not something I see very often in general, the focus on the mid side. But again, there is merit to that idea. There is merit to the play of leaving B, focusing on mid, and usually, depending on the timings, but usually you can actually kind of, more often than not, I feel like, pivot back and get a kill on someone running into B as well. Because if there's 3 players mid, you kill them. The 2 players B are pretty hesitant to actually want to run out, right? They don't want to run out with only 2 players. It's kind of awkward. One of you dies, you're kind of completely fucked. So Usually it doesn't go quite as smoothly as it did for Na'Vi there, but I mean, still, Eternal Fire, it's a 5v3. Na'Vi just had more utility than they expected, I think, and they hit some nice shots. I mean, you just have to respect that. 1v3 for Wicadia. I mean, the money matters here a little bit, but it's not a huge deal unless he was to take down like two of these players or something, right? Then as long as that didn't happen, it's not going to make a big difference. But at the same time, saving your scout isn't exactly going to help you for the following round either. So it's not really a situation where you're thinking of saving. It's just that the damage doesn't really matter. It's like win or who cares. Again, okay, I want to know what the tendency they're seeing. Why are they walking? Why are they in tunnels so aggressively, so consistently? Is it for this reason? Is Eternal Fire? I think the idea that Eternal Fire plays very dedicated on this side, where they play 3 players up here and no mid rotator in anywhere in here, could make some sense. Or I mean, generally, when I say that no mid rotator, usually I mean like either the mid player is in B, or a lot of the time you would expect he might be outside of B, and then you just literally have one player completely on his own, and you're thinking if we can kill that guy, we can convert it super easily. But at the same time, if they just molly and smoke, it doesn't look like Na'Vi actually want to be pushing through that smoke. So maybe they're seeing that Eternal Fire is doing like this jiggle smoke out here, this little play, which is, by the way, very strong. It's like a really good play, but maybe they're seeing that Eternal Fire are doing that a little too often, and so they want to actually exploit that idea, where that player comes close up and they can actually catch him, especially with Wonderful here, that might be able to catch him on that jiggle, get the kill, and then just immediately push into B. Especially both that and the kind of like late rotator idea are both true. Yeah, I'm really interested to see what the exact idea behind that is. But they just pivot out middle and Xantarez is just throwing a nade. Okay, that's unfortunate. I mean, Eternal Fire already 5v4. However, the kill they got, where did they get this kill? Did they get it on long? Where did they actually get this kill? Must be in... Where did they get this kill? Hello? Okay, fuck it. I'm like, dude, does Na'Vi know they have 4 long? Is the question I was trying to answer there. That was the question I was trying to answer. Okay, whatever. Xantarez gets caught throwing a nade, but obviously Wicadia is there, and Wonderful gets the trade. I wanted to see what Xantarez was doing. So Xantarez gets close up. They're in a decent position. Wicadia is leading out, and then Xantarez probably tilted off this one. He just pulls out a flash. Wicadia was in front of him. They want to wait for a second to clear out. Wicadia backs up behind him, and then he gets killed because of it. Maybe that's part of the plan, but I would have expected, I would think that Wicadia is probably usually supposed to be peeking just a little wider than Xantarez there to catch that, just so Xantarez doesn't die for free. But somehow this turns into a 3v3. After losing mid, or losing long, having no control of anything, starting 3 players in tunnels, one of them getting naded for 30 damage, 5v4, they just walk out mid, get the initial entry, which, by the way, just to be clear, I've said this in another video, I'm sure, but I'm going to say this again. Walking out mid in these types of situations is actually quite strong. It is actually a quite strong play. Now, it's, to me, better depending on the situation you're in. So, like, teams, I feel like, or higher level pugs, well, no, actually I take that back. Because I'm thinking like, at low level pugs, I usually see a mid player stay mid for a really long time. And that can be tough to deal with. Walks just had no chance here, by the way. He's got no kit. He's got no util. He's got 70 health. They know where he's coming from. And the time is ticking down. He just has like a 0% chance here. This would be this would be like the best clutch of all time if he somehow won that. Anyways, I was thinking like lower levels, they typically have a mid player for longer, which is, something you walk out mid, you're going to walk into a mid player. But at the same time, if there is a mid player, trading on him, you can pivot, you can like speed up into a B hit if you kill that mid player, if they're solo B, right? I'm just thinking that like the mid, especially into the later parts of the round, walking out mid is very strong because there's oftentimes a gap. And so you can get out to this position. You can do that play I mentioned where you smoke off mid to B as you're already out mid and just get this very fast speed up into the play. You can actually have an opper peek out here and see where their rotator is some of the time. You can catch players a lot. You can, and you can also make sure that by pushing them off of mid, if you do go A or you go B, the rotates are as far away as possible, right? It's just a really solid like play to make when the round is kind of out of hand, like you're 4v5 or 3v4, or just late round when you're at a disadvantage. It's a risk. You could lose, but at the same time, it's very good reasoning behind the risk and the potential upside. That is a dude, the way people are using dualies, you would think they're like insanely accurate at range. I don't think they're that accurate at range, but man, I've seen in this event specifically, so many dualies just peek in and just insta headshot someone from like relatively long range. Like that is, I feel like it's not long range, but it's like the far side of mid range, right? And then the spray. Love them. Love them. I just love when people shoot the dualies right. Okay, this is... oh, dude, I've mentioned this in like 7 videos now. It's like, dude, when I'm in pugs, I see people shoot the dualies and they're like, tap, 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 tap. And I'm like, shoot him faster, man. Shoot him faster. Jeez. What a dumb thing to get tilted. Like, I don't get tilted about it, but what a dumb thing for me to actually get like emotionally invested in, okay? I don't know why that like bothers me at all. I don't know why, okay? Maybe it's because I was the earliest dualies adopter. I was telling people they should be buying dualies back in 2016. Just like I told people to buy the Krieg back in 2016. Nobody listened for 3 years. Whatever. Buy from Eternal Fire. Okay. The buy... Okay. Actually, they just threw a lot of util early, okay? I was like, this buy came with nothing. This buy is no... What the fuck is this smoke? Wicadia. Oh, I know how this smoke is thrown. You throw... this insta-smoke, yeah, I've done this myself. And I think you have to, I think this is a W step forward jump throw instead of just a normal jump throw. So he ends up just smoking himself off completely, which is hilarious. I guess good thing they weren't going for the long play, because if they were going for it, they probably don't know it misses until it's too late, and they're already committed out long, and they just end up, well, and there was only 2 players long, I think, for Na'Vi, right? So maybe it still could have worked anyways. But 5 AKs for Eternal Fire, no op in the hands of Na'Vi. They're basically playing a bonus round. They've got a decent amount of money in the bank, but especially with the ease of the cat rotate, they could go take long and then still pivot back into a cat hold relatively comfortably. And what you don't love running into is MP9s on cat. Like AKs are great, and the MP9 is a $1,200. I don't even. It's $1,150, $1,250, $1,200. Whatever. It's like a $1,200 SMG, and yet you're still like, fuck that. MP9 on cat, I would rather go B. I have an option, run into an MP9 on cat or run into an M4 B site. I'd rather run into the fucking M4, dude. No shot I ever want to run into an MP9 in my life close range. That shit is busto. Alright, so A site control, but this is like still not... I mean, this is a pretty uncomfortable situation, and it is a bit of a risk for Calyx to move back. Like, this is a good play. Oh my god. That's the MP9. It's not Calyx missing. It's Wonderful has 39 health. Okay, Calyx, you actually just have to get this. Okay, actually, oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Austin messaged me earlier. He messaged me earlier. He sent me a clip. I'm going to show you the clip he sent me. He said, is it just me? Am I high on drugs, or is Calyx aiming too high? And he sent me a clip. Hold on, this is the clip Austin sent me. He's aiming very high here, right? This is like pretty damn high for most of these angles. This is not head level. This is above head level. Why do we have a pro that aims at stomach level, and we have another pro that's aiming? He is so is fucking Shaquille O'Neal about to peek into you, dude? What is going on? Why? What? This is so high. But yet, I guess like... Wonderful kind of almost puts his head into it, because Wonderful peeks out so far forward. Okay, no, Calyx just like very smoothly moves his crosshair down. I was thinking Wonderful ran straight into him to the point that his crosshair was almost on him. I mean, Wonderful does absolutely beat him. I mean, let's be honest. He just absolutely destroys him. Like, to be fair. A couple extra seconds, like a couple extra shots off, Calyx probably gets that kill, but still. I think he's supposed to get that kill regardless. Another nice shot. This is what playing at the pro level looks like. I feel like it would be cool to look at sometimes like I know there's a YouTube video of this. I'm pretty sure there is. Like, iconic plays, but from the POV of the people dying. And it's like, oh my god. It's like, they didn't even have a chance to shoot back. They're just dead immediately. Alright. 10-5. Major jump spotting. They do have the mid smoke down. Removes all counterplay. I hate the, I don't know. I don't hate the smoke. I'm like looking for something to be annoyed with. This smoke does feel kind of sucky. It does like give so much control of the T's, but maybe that's a good thing. I mean, having to deal with people in middle is one of the more annoying things about Dust 2 historically, getting caught off guard by so many different angles because there's so many places they can peek you from. Getting killed by this opper staring down this angle because he smoked Xbox and they just like headshot you crossing. It is pretty annoying. So maybe it's just an overall good thing. Not the greatest buy here for Eternal Fire. They are doing kind of like the, I heard someone call it a Furia buy the other day, and maybe Furia is the first team that did this. Maybe it was like Na'Vi, old school Na'Vi that did this with like Simple having an AK. I'll note one thing, by the way. So if you actually look at this, I noticed this on the broadcast, noticed this. So Alexi B jiggling this, jiggling. He's waiting. He's going to go, okay, nobody's here. I'm going to give this smoke over to my teammate on plat. So Wonderful can smoke himself off. I'm not sure if he's thinking smoke himself off if he gets mollied or just re-smoke Cat when the smoke comes down, especially in a situation like this. So here, if this smoke is down right now, this isn't, I mean, this is still a fine play, but it's a little bit more risky. But if there's a smoke up here, they throw the smoke here, you can get beside it really effectively, and he could even potentially re-smoke this. So this is actually a pretty decent situation. But if we look at what happened to Alexi B goes, drops that smoke, comes back, and Eternal Fire's out long. So Alexi B actually has to rotate back around. They have to get aggressive on Cat here because they've lost long control, and Eternal Fire is literally just YOLO rushing up long immediately as fast as possible. And then this one, they caught this on the broadcast too. I'm not going to rewind that just out of respect. That is a rough whiff. And Eternal Fire pick up the round, and that is a key round. It's very similar to the one Na'Vi picked up in the first half, where Na'Vi won with some pistols. They were on an eco, essentially. I mean, this is like maybe more of an investment than the one Na'Vi had, but if you look at the money, I mean, all of a sudden from ecoing to having a buy, even if they lose this round, it's a big swing, and Na'Vi aren't feeling that comfortable. They lose one more round. It's very losable. Although Ime kind of makes up for it the next round by getting the 2K there. Another one. I mean, that's not quite as egregious of a whiff. Woxic probably should be getting that the majority of the time, but I don't think you can even... Like, there's missed kills. Oh my god. There's missed kills. What is Ime really thinking he's getting here? Is he really thinking he's going to land this shot? This is like... I think about this sometimes, man. What was Cold Zera thinking? Cold Zera, when he jumping doubled. There is a 20,000 times higher % chance that you get killed jumping with the op like that, like Cold Zera did, than you actually get a jumping op double kill. It's such a ridiculous play to go for. What was he fucking thinking? What, like that's just like objectively such a terrible decision. Maybe he's thinking he's gonna bait them into swing on top of him and he's gonna no-scope them straight up. But like Ime's just jumping, just takes a like. Is that necessary? Was that necessary? Was that necessary? I don't know. I don't think he's like thinking that deep about it. He's just, you know, it's on instinct here. Maybe he's trying to spot to see if Calyx is falling back, but it does end up giving Calyx the kill. Anyways, what I was saying about Woxic there is like, there's a category of kills, there's whiffs, and then there's like missed kills, which I think is usually what you see in the pro scene. It's like, here's a kill that they should have gotten, but it's not quite a whiff. It's just a kill that they should have gotten that they didn't end up getting, right? It's like, it's not like they missed an easy kill. It's not an easy kill. It's just a kill they usually get type of thing, right? And for Woxic, I think that's bordering on whiffing. It's a kill he definitely should be getting the majority of the time, but it's like, it's also a kill that you're going to miss sometimes, and it's because you're running straight forward as you move into it, right? It's definitely one that's losable, very much so, occasionally. That's crazy. Was this not 5v3 to start out with? And they just turn it back into a 3v3? And then JL goes for the peek. He's got a decent timing. I think, does he just bobble this peek where he just peeks out not quite far enough? I just tried to hit my slow down button to see if he messes up the peek, and I hit the wrong button. That's great. That's great. That's great. That's great. Okay. So here's the peek. Oh, he peeks just a little bit past. He like doesn't peek far enough, and then he peeks a little bit past. And from Major's POV, he might actually see him on the first peek. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Oh, he doesn't see him on the first peek. Still, it's awkward for Jail. I mean, it's a standard play. You don't necessarily want to let those people walk into you, especially because people know flashes now from like back here that you can toss and it blows up right in front of you and you just get absolutely destroyed. Those I've seen people throw those before. So it is like generally, especially in CS2, but just in general, peeking into your opponents is going to be better than letting them peek into you. Sometimes it goes badly, but generally that's the case. By the way, there's a small thing. This molly, I've mentioned this in a different review also. In general, you don't want to throw it like that. You throw it like that to be safe. So I think in the case of, I believe, Calix threw the first one, or whoever threw the first one, he threw it like that because he wanted to get rid of it quickly, get it out, and throw it safely, which I think is fine. But if you have a door smoke especially, you're safe to throw it. You want to move out here and just throw it basically above the B sign. You just want it to bounce off this. It's going to bounce down. It's going to spread further in your favor, right? It's going to spread further out wide, which is what you want, so that people can't be like here. Like people can't be here, jump up on this thing. Like you prevent all of the types of play that people want to make around that by throwing it differently, and you make sure that there's just no chance for them to actually get through it. Now, Calix's, the second molly there did actually land essentially the way you want it to land, but sometimes with the way this ledge works, sometimes it just bounces off of nothing, and then it actually burns the bomb planter. Like, that's why it's just generally, if you're throwing this as a remolly or whatever yourself, you probably want to be throwing it off the back wall. But, nice little nade from Bit, turns it into a 2v2. By the way, this is like the best Afterplant spot. One of the best Afterplant spots in the game, in my opinion. Big box on Dust 2, B site. It's just, you can control everything. You have a good angle on everything. It's just like such an unbelievably good spot. And I feel like when I see players in Pugs, it's like they avoid this. Like, they don't want to play here. Like, you have this insanely advantageous angle on the player coming in through a window. He walks up, he gets onto the ledge, and you see him as he's on the ledge. So it's like he's not really expecting you. You can easily pivot over to look at door. You could be crouching here if you wanted to. You can even sit on this ledge if you want to, like if you really wanted to. You sit on this ledge, peeking this, and then stand up, and you can see window. You can peek over here. And for tunnels, it's not even that bad of an engagement. Like, it's just such a weird off angle for them to deal with from tunnels, but you can even like play safe from that if you want to crouch here too. Man, it's such a, I don't know why, I just feel like I've seen a few Pugs recently where people are like choosing every angle but this angle, and it's like, dude, especially if you have someone in tunnels, it's like the best spot ever. But Major picks up the, I mean, technically that's a 1v2. Realistically, he could basically trade it on the bomb planter, so it's more of a 1v1 than anything. But that is like a clutch 1v1, because I mean, Navi lose that and the game is like kind of up in the air. Maybe it's like a 50-50. Major loses that and Navi basically close out. You know, they're ready to close out the entire game. Easiest long cross smoke, by the way. You've probably seen this if you've been watching my videos, because you probably watched you probably watched a few pro games recently, so you know this smoke. You just toss it here. Really easy long cross smoke, thrown from complete safety. There's just like very little downsides to that smoke. Thrown from safety, you can easily throw it and then run away back into long. You know, there's just like, it's just, yeah. Fast long play from Eternal Fire. Smoke lands before. So there's a couple ways this smoke can land, and it depends. I think it depends team from team. I'm not sure every team throws it the same. So if it lands in the little doorway here, it actually lands slightly faster. But to me, I never have been a huge fan of the way this lands. It just feels like it's not wide enough. It doesn't give quite the angle you want. You can still get shot from car super easily here, whereas if it lands a little bit wider, I think you can get in a pit without someone spotting you from car, or maybe they have to be like here or something. I don't know. But some teams really like that. I think it lands a little bit faster, which is the key to prevent what Xantarez did to Navi, I suppose. But I mean, Woxic almost pays for it. Wonderful, very quick shot to almost take him down. And then most likely, I would have assumed, actually, that Alexi B was sitting with the smoke out, so Wonderful could keep his op out, and then if he gets mollied, he just drops the smoke on the molly. But instead, Alexi B throws it like that, maybe not realizing Woxic could be in pit, because that's like a perfect smoke if nobody can be in pit. It's a little risky in the case that they were in, which is that Woxic could be in pit. I think Woxic potentially could have found a timing, actually, to... he does have a timing. He just gets blind. Okay, maybe the flash... I don't think that's their flash, is it? It must be their flash. Their flash gets thrown at the exact right time? No, that was a T flash. Okay. Yeah. So Woxic actually could have got that kill if he didn't get team flash, it seems like. Ime on Cat, this is kind of make or break. Ime dies here. This is actually very winnable for Na'Vi. I mean, why do I say that? It's winnable either way. And in fact, if Ime dies, Bit's on the rotate here, so Ime can die. Ime does die. Calyx doesn't know Cat's completely clear. It's again, because of the boxes, this rotate back around is just so easy that you're like really have to be paranoid that someone could be there at any point. So you end up with the trade, which is key. And you do have time actually for Eternal Fire to back up, right? They could go B, theoretically. But and you might think to yourself, well, they just saw that there's another player coming Cat, like they're stacking A. Why don't they go back? They could, but it's really risky to go back, unfortunately, because there could just be someone sitting outside long, and you have to take that kind of risk. You have to gamble. Are they sitting outside long with a player, like, or are they stacked 4 on site? Because if they're stacked 4 on site, I think going back is a relatively reasonable play. If you if you know they're stacked 5 on site rather than anyone watching the flank, but when there's 5 players like that, you're expecting someone's probably going to be holding the flank. And at the same time, the problem is the amount of time it takes to go back around through T-spawn. I think this is like the bigger problem. To go back from here all the way through T-spawn back into tunnels, it just takes such a ludicrously long amount of time that it's so easy for someone to jump down from Cat and get into here, and then it's just the round can go so wrong so easily when you try and do that type of play. I had someone try and call that in a pug. They're like, okay, we're out long. Okay, come back through T-spawn to B, and I'm like, no thanks. Like, how about well, I did it, and then we lost, and I was like, okay, let's not do that ever again. Thank you. Whatever. 3v4, Wicadia trying to get a little bit of space. They don't really have utility, do they? They don't have the utility. Like, you want a Molly Gandalf or Molly Cat. Either Molly is really strong. Molly here, you can clear Gandalf. You got to deal with one of these angles, right? It's like, it's so tough to do anything if you can get jump shotted, but also shot from Gandalf, but also shot from... It's like, fucked. So yeah, Wicadia just wants to get a little bit of space here, get himself into a pretty good position. And if he got around here and there wasn't a player Gandalf, this would feel pretty good. In fact, he even gets a kill before dying regardless. And then Woxic has just been on this whole tournament, hasn't he? Like, this whole tournament, I mean, just recent memory, Woxic has been on point to a ridiculous degree. All right, spots out. Just a quick shot on a Wonderful, turns into a 2v2. Trades over to the AK, pretty good situation. He's going to end up being close to his teammate here. Nice shot from Bit. Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought that's another pivotal clutch situation. For some reason, I thought Eternal Fire won that. That would have been 10-9 instead of 11-8. That would have put this into a ridiculously close game. But I mean, even still, Na'Vi lose 3 players. They don't have a ton of money to work with. They yet again have an MP9. This time it's on JL. It's not the situation you want to be in whatsoever. And this time around, Eternal Fire go for the delayed long hit. I called this a delayed long rush one time, and someone was like, excuse me, but there's no such thing as a delayed long rush. It's either a long rush or it's not. And it's like, yes, okay. I mean, true. Yes, true. I don't know why I'm talking shit. It's completely true. But still, come on. Come on. Give me a fucking break, man. Jesus. All right, so this is the smoke I think is, like, better. It just gives you so much more room to work around. And if someone pushes, well, the thing about this one is if someone flashes to push through, they are in the middle of the open. Whereas the further this goes deep, the more it's like, I see Nico come through, and if he's here when he gets through the smoke, this is like hard to deal with because he's so hard to kill from anyone blue. He's basically only fighting people that would be blinded by his own flash, but that's kind of like a side topic, I suppose. So it's funny. I remember, it's funny. I hadn't really thought about it this way, but this is like straight facts. When I can't remember who said this. It might have even been Alexi V. Actually, I think it was Apex, maybe? Okay, so they were talking about Dust 2, and the chat was like, so you can play Dust 2 more strategic or less strategic. So you can do, I want to see the shot from Oxy. You can play it strategic where you take out long, you get someone in a pit, you go back, you take cat, and you try and end like by splitting A, right? Nice shot from Woxic. Right? You can play it strategic, and he labeled that as like the strategic way to play it. Or the more strategic way to play it. Or you can play Dust 2 as a puggier map, where you just go out long, wait a little bit, wait a few seconds, and then you just end A. Right? Like you go out long, push up to site, and hit A. And I just thought that was kind of funny because I heard that maybe a couple weeks or a month or two ago. In recent memory, certainly. And I was like, I'd always thought to myself previously, like, yeah, you can definitely do both of those things. It's not like one or the other is completely wrong. But in general, I've always thought like the way to play Dust 2 is to take long, get a guy in pit, wait, go back, take cat, and then you kind of split on A like that the majority of the time. Obviously, you have to do a bit of both, but I've always thought of that as like the bread and butter way to play it. But it does make perfect sense that like, yeah, that is like the more, because there are more ways to die, so you have to use your utility a little bit more effectively when you do that. But it's just funny, I heard that so recently, and then we're seeing Eternal Fire just doing that exact thing, where they're just taking long, then going up A. Now, a couple of the times, it's kind of the situations that I think that any team would want to do it. Depending on the situation in the round, right, you want to decide between which option you're going to go. If you lose a lot of mid-control early, of course, if you need a certain number of players, because obviously you have to commit one to pit, so you need a certain amount of players, and you need to have the time to do it. Usually you want to have... when you go back around cat, typically you want to have a player, at least historically, you would want to have a player in lower tunnels. Because if someone can get into lower tunnels, they can really fuck up your whole day when you try and go back for cat control. But with the current iteration of Dust 2, it is a little bit harder to get a player into lower tunnels. Makes that play a little bit more awkward in general, I think, especially because you're not smoking Xbox either. So if you smoked Xbox, then a player in lower is kind of less of a big problem. As well, it just makes it a little bit more more tempting to go just for the straight long play as opposed to the, take long and go back cat play. But still, I think you want to do probably a little bit of a mix of both. But now we've got Eternal Fire. I've said this so many times before. It's like typically, and I remember learning this in like 2005 from like a pro IGL at the time. It's like, if 4 players can't do the job, 5 isn't going to make the difference. And that's generally a good idea to live by. There are scenarios where it sometimes can be slightly different, but I think generally that's the case, and that's why you can have Calyx holding the flank here, and it's not the end of the world. And okay, so Eternal Fire have been taking long, going up A from long. And the problem with that is that you end up being in this situation here where they can just over-rotate to A. Maybe they're not even full over-rotating to A. They're still playing pretty safe. And this kind of, I feel like, goes back into the concept that Kerrigan talked about when playing against Astralis, which was, against Astralis, you don't try and play more and more tactical. You play less and less tactical, or more and more, maybe you play more and more like tactical, as in you're using tactics in the mid-round, but less strategic. You try and play a little bit more random because they're going to play so safe, you can catch them by making kind of like aggressive plays like this, where it's like, yeah, we did go take long and then go A 4 times. We're going to do it a fucking 5th time. And you play against a team like Astralis, and Astralis is like, well, we know that they could just change it up, right? So they're going to play it safe the whole time. I think Na'Vi might be one of those teams where they're going to play it safe the whole time. And so these types of kind of like gambly, like kind of on their surface, like, well, why aren't you just stacking? You know they do this every time. It's like, you don't know they do this every time. Unless you have like a huge repertoire of games where you like actually have seen them do this hundreds of times, or at least like tens and tens of times in a row. you don't actually know that they only go long to A just because they did it a few times. That being said, in pugs, you definitely just assume that your opponents are going to do that if they've done it this many times. But Eternal Fire do change up the timing quite a bit, which is key. I got a whole tangent. I just wanted to mention that Eternal Fire can do this, but they do need to change up the timings. They need to be careful on the timings where they don't do it fast every time or do it slow every time. Okay, this is a nice play. Flash from Alexi B. JL, full trust on the flash, comes straight through. Oy. Major is not the opper, but he's got the op because of the Bogdan law. But I think if Woxic has the op here, he knows his job. I think that this feels to me almost like a know your job thing. Is it? Is it? Maybe he thinks that's just like a T flash that they're throwing across or something. But to me, it's like, I think if Woxic is holding this angle, to me, he knows what it's like to hold this angle. He knows that people are going to flash push through the long smoke, and one of your jobs as this player, you hear that flash, you turn back and make sure that someone doesn't come through the smoke and kill 3 people. But maybe it's just a brain fart, because he just turns around and pulls out a molly. Maybe it's just a brain fart in that, like, he knows that's his job, and he's just like, he just accidentally pulled out a molly as he turned. He, like, misclicked it or something. But to me, like, initial thought process there is like, this is a situation where Major doesn't quite, he's not used to being in that situation, so he thinks that flash might be just his team's flash, like they're throwing a flash to cross or something, or he just doesn't quite register what that flash means, whereas Woxic has probably been in that spot like hundreds of times, so he knows that, you know, as soon as this flash is going to get thrown a lot, you turn immediately and you get the kill. I don't know. I might be reading a little bit too much into it, but, you know, that's what we're here for. 5v3, right off the bat. And not only that, but you don't even have a smoke on Xantarez. If you wanted to go mid to B, the smoke is on Woxic, who's in tunnels. So essentially, Woxic is forced to wait out this smoke. I was going to say he's forced to wait out the smoke and then hope he can get a kill on someone afterwards. And he might have actually got it on Wonderful, because I think Wonderful was crossing after that smoke was down. Not 100% sure, but as it turns out, he isn't forced to wait for the smoke. He actually just backs up immediately, doesn't take the risk, and it leaves it on a Bit to hold the A site. Bit has no support, so the best he can do really is survive. If Alexi B had a flash, that would be optimal. But I mean, if he can get to this position, because the molly doesn't allow him any further forward, or doesn't like actually push him all the way back, he's got just a slight little bit of space here. That means Eternal Fire can't really swing on him to kill him because Alexi B's here, right? So there's really no way to push Bit out of this position, which means Bit is just going to be a nuisance for the rest of the round. He's going to be very hard to deal with. And Ime can come straight through the smoke to catch the flank off. And Woxic, 3 months ago, might have been looking either forward, trying to deal with Bit and trying to peek someone pit, or back to look at the flank. But in today's CS, with a jump-up box, he's looking at the box, which is totally reasonable. And if he had a rifle, he... Funnily enough, based on what I said about last round, if Woxic had a rifle here, he actually probably sees Ime coming through that smoke and he's got a chance to kill him. Instead, he's scoped in, which means Ime sees him first, gets the free kill, and the round win. And a 13-10 victory for Na'Vi. And that was... Man... I didn't watch the whole series. I watched a lot of it. That was a crazy series, and I think respect has to be given, obviously, to Eternal Fire for making a legit run. They beat Vitality. They brought Na'Vi to 5 maps, and not only that, but like even the maps they lost were generally like close games. They absolutely could have won this game with if that B play. The B play in the first half, like 3rd round or whatever, with the Tech 9s coming fast out tunnels, if they just throw the molly maybe a second earlier, or maybe they just, you know, get an extra kill there. The 5v3 B hold, like where they push out of B, that's still a winning situation in my eyes. 5v3 retake B, that's still a winning situation. They just kind of got picked off a little bit. They maybe were a little bit too aggressive on the retake. They got picked off a little bit. A couple rounds go slightly differently, and they win. And to be honest, I was thinking this during the game. Like, thinking back about that game, like, Na'Vi won but it just feels like Eternal Fire at a lot of times was the better team, at least strategically. They feel like, I don't know if better team is the right word. They had a lot of the control of that game, more control than you would necessarily expect from a team that lost. Yeah, really impressive from Eternal Fire. Yeah.